Battlehosts. Be a better gamer, build a better community.
Welcome to Battlehosts, a podcast and website dedicated to helping you become a better 40K gamer and to build a better community of players. I'm host Mark, and with me tonight is Sean.
Hello.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe to us on iTunes and YouTube to catch all the latest episodes. You can also follow us on Facebook under The Battlehosts. If you'd like to support The Battlehosts for as little as $1 a month, please visit patreon.com/thebattlehosts. If you join for $3 a month, you get access to our Discord chat where we discuss all things related to the hobby. Now, tonight is our second Black Library Book Club series.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a while.
It has, a few months.
Yeah, we wanted to do this a little more regularly, but this one took a little longer.
It did.
So
I feel like we've been prepped to do it for a while, but something's been going on in the greater world that has made it harder for us to get together to do something.
It has been challenging. Yes. And if you're hearing this from the future, way in the future, we're in the middle of COVID-19 right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a little tricky to get together to record some of these episodes, but hopefully it's worth the wait. This time we have two books. They are featured books around sort of the God Machines or the Titans. Titanicus by Dan Abnett and Imperator, Wrath of the Omnissiah by Gav Thrope. It's Imperator, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Imperator.
I don't know why I think it's Imperator. I mispronounce it all the time, even in my head.
I mean, that's kind of almost cooler, though.
Yeah.
I kind of like Imperator a little bit, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Imperator.
It's Imperator. Good.
Yeah.
Both have Titans kind of at the center of their story, and it's funny because when we were choosing this, we're like, oh, these two book covers have Titans on the center of them. Let's just pick them.
That seems like a natural connection there.
But they're very, very, very different stories.
They are.
For sure.
Yeah, which I really enjoy.
Yeah. I definitely like the contrast. We'll start with a spoiler-free section and kind of give our recommendations, just our overall recommendations for each book. We'll then do more of an in-depth spoiler filled, and we'll definitely give you a spot where you can pause, come back to it later after you've read the books.
Yes.
Assuming we recommend them. Because the last time we did a Black Library series, this is part 2. We did another one before this, and we actually didn't end up recommending one of the books.
We did not.
So it was
Poor
Dark Imperium. Yeah, not a fan. Emperor's Spears, though. Or Spirit of the Emperor, sorry.
Spirit of the Emperor.
If you have not read that,
go read it.
Go read it, for sure.
Yep.
But we will do more of these and hopefully a little more of a regular clip. And at the very end of the show, we'll kind of tease what we're going to be talking about next.
Ooh.
So it's going to be very exciting. Before we get into it, let's hear a word from our sponsor, DGT.
We all love Warhammer 40K, but sometimes games just take too long. Using a game timer is the best way to make sure games finish and for both players to get an equal amount of time. Check out the Easy Game Timer from DGT, manufacturers and designers of the timers officially sanctioned by the International Chess Federation. It's simple to set up and customize, and your settings are saved when it's turned off. It's easy to use with a large moving lever for changing turns and a clear digital readout. It's the most affordable and high-quality game timer on the market and is the choice of most 40K events. Whether you want to practice before a big event or you just want to be a better player, the Easy Game Timer from DGT is the perfect game timer for your 40K events. The DGT Easy Game Timer is available from many online retailers. Wholesale pricing is also available for tournament organizers. Check these fine clocks out at dgtnorthamerica.com. Speed up your game and improve your play with the Easy Game Timer from DGT.
All right, and we're back. So the Black Library is the literary arm of Games Workshop, publishes novels by several different authors set in the Sigmar and 40K universes. I think there might even be a Blood Bowl or maybe books.
They write quite a bit.
Yeah. Some of the books are amazing, others, not so much, and that's why we review them on our podcast.
Mm-hmm.
For our Black Library Book Club, we compare two books by two different authors with a similar story or a theme, or in this case, their stories were very different, but they at least had giant robots on the cover. That was kind of the thing we're going for.
That's enough.
Going for that theme, yeah. So I figured they'd be similar enough to compare. Titanicus has a huge cast of characters, and the battles and the conflict take over a large battlefield. So Titanicus is massive. Yeah. It's almost 500 pages. It's a long book.
It's massive, yeah.
There's a lot of plot lines in it.
Mm-hmm. And the scale of it is, it's a global scale.
It's a global scale. Yeah. It is a planet in conflict, for sure. Imperator has like 3 to 5 main characters, and it takes place entirely inside an Imperator Titan.
Which I love.
Which is cool. Yeah, it was a very different setting, which I liked it. And the contrast, I think, was super interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we didn't plan it, but that's just kind of how these books came out.
Yeah.
So I think this is kind of a testament of how open the 40K universe is. You can tell a lot of different stories, and I think that's why they have murder mystery themed things coming out and some horror fiction. I think they're trying to kind of stretch their legs a little bit to say that 40K for so long was kind of this continuing narrative, and now it's just it's just a universe you can tell stories in.
Yeah, and I've always been a big proponent of large universes that have so many stories out there to diversify what kind of stories they're telling. To give you an example, as a Star Wars fan, I've always been a fan of get away from Jedi, tell other stories.
Yeah.
Right? Smuggler stories and war stories in the Star Wars universe and whatever it may be. I used to read a lot more Star Wars books than I do now, but I love those kind of breaking away from the traditional evil versus bad, Sith versus Jedi narrative. And 40K really benefits when it breaks out of the generic 40K bolter porn kind of idea.
Yeah, agreed.
Here's a planet that's fighting. Here's your main character. Here's the enemy. Okay, they're going to fight. Ooh, yeah. I mean, those can be done really well and they can be really enjoyable. But when you get something that's an author that has a drive to, I want to explore this piece of the narrative. I want to explore this little bit. Yeah. And you can go back to Dan Abnett. Where did Gaunt's Ghost start, if not just the idea of what is 40K like for the little guy?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. And now one of the most, if not the most famous 40K book series, if you're not counting all of Horus Heresy together, started from that little idea of what does this look like on the ground? Yeah. And I love those ideas.
Yeah. And by the way, if you haven't read Gaunt's Ghost, you should.
Go read that too.
They're just good stuff. But really, it is... You're right. It's a great universe that it's great when they explore the edge cases or they make up their own characters because then it becomes their character, like Gaunt or Caiaphas Cain, for example.
Absolutely.
I mean, granted, it's not everybody's cup of tea. Some people like the grimdark, but he's awesome. Like he's an awesome counterpoint to a lot of stuff that goes on.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and they have children's books now, which I've not read, obviously, but I think there's room for even for that. Like, why not?
Well, and those children's books were derided by the community when they came out. And I was skeptical.
Sure.
And then I read a plot synopsis of one of these books, and I'm just like, oh man, this is still grimdark.
Sure.
It's like grimdark for kids, but it's one of the, I think in one of the books, there's only one adult character that you meet that actually stays alive. Wow. Everybody else dies. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's these kids running from a death mark the entire book and just watching people around them die. And it's not as gory and brutal as in the description, but when that's still 40K.
Yeah, there you go. I think that's good. I think it's a universe filled with exploration, and I think it's best when they go and explore some of those spaces. Yeah. Like you said, Star Wars, if I never have to see another Skywalker again, I feel like that's gone now, right? Yeah. They don't need to.
We're finally done.
Yeah, okay, so let's take a little side tangent here. The Mandalorian was not amazing, but it was very good.
Yes.
It was very much a Western set in the 40K, it's very much a Western set in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, absolutely.
It literally was a Western. Like every plot line was the different, the Western.
Yeah.
But it was effective.
Yeah, and it stood out so much because it had taken such a different tone on it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really think about outside of the original 3 in Star Wars, and I know that we are, but I'm going to bring this back to 40K. Outside of the original 3, what stories stand out the most when we think about it? And really, a lot of people are going to hold up Rogue One and The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
And Rogue One is a spy war story kind of thing where it's bleak at the end. It is not happy when you finish that. Yeah. It leads perfectly into the original series, but it stands out because it feels so different.
Yeah.
And then, of course, The Mandalorian, as you covered it. It explores these outside areas that we don't get to see. It explores these planets that, what does it look like to be some backwater planet in Star Wars that's not Tatooine?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's really effective. And when you bring that to 40K, you can start asking questions like, well, what does it look like to be a guardsman on the frontier on a feudal world that discovers a gene stealer cult?
Sure. Yeah.
Right. This isn't a hive world. We're used to thinking of gene stealer cults in the underhive and stuff. But what does it look like if everybody's riding horses? Yeah. Those kind of questions can make really cool ideas. And then you start grabbing other genres to really rely on them. And suddenly your feudal guardsman hunting gene stealer cults is actually pretty much Van Helsing hunting, hunting vampires. And
wait, does that book exist?
No.
It should.
Did I sell you on it?
Yeah, you totally
As far as I know, it doesn't exist. I'm not. There is a short story about a feudal world with a Tyranid incursion. That's all that's coming to mind.
Yeah,
I am more than willing to admit that I could have maybe stolen that synopsis from somewhere, but I'm not aware of it. Listeners, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's a great synopsis, though. It's definitely, even when Aaron Dembski Bowden writes about the Black Legion. He's using a lot of side characters. So not Horus, Abaddon is not often the main character. He's sort of he's not central to the plot. It's his lieutenants and the other things that kind of do his bidding.
Yep.
Those are the kinds of novels that work really, really well.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
To my knowledge, I think the only ones that really work that are like Ahriman series is pretty good. But to me, Black Library works best when it explores the edges. Yep. Yeah. So, look, we talked about Gaunt's Coast. Let's talk about Titanicus. Spoiler-free review. And this is Dan Abnett. He's one of my personal favorites. Most people say ADB, Aaron Dembski-Bowden, and Dan Abnett are the two best. Yeah. Some people kind of go back and forth. I personally like Dan Abnett more, only because of the subject of his books tend to be a little more relatable to me. Chaos is not my jam. Yeah. Dan he's had more hits and misses, I think. ADB's very consistently good. Yeah. I think even if his earlier stuff is his Night Lord trilogy stuff is a little bit, it's not quite as good as it used to be.
Yeah, he grew into it a little bit.
But he's become better. Dan Abnett has had a couple misses, I think.
Absolutely.
But to me, he's probably one of my favorites.
Yeah, and I think Dan Abnett hits a scope where he covers a lot of ground in terms of the elements of war in 40K that ADB does not.
Yes.
ADB, if I think of ADB, he's a Space Marine writer. Yeah. In a lot of ways. Yeah. It's going to be Space Marines. And he's really, really good at that. Oh, yeah. Oh, man. The tools he uses are perfect. Yep. But Abnett's going to write about Guardsmen. He's going to write about Aeronautica Imperialis. He's going to write about Titans. He has all these different elements, and he does very well in all of those different spheres. Yeah. I think of identifying what makes this cool. And we see this even in this book. It's not all Titans.
Nope. No, not at all. So the plot is there is a Mechanicum colony of Orestes. Chaos Titans have arrived to seize control of the major forge on the planet. And a Legio of Titans has arrived to take on the Chaos forces. Because at this point, a Legio had to be diverted from the Sabbat Crusade, which is part of the Gaunt's Coast, a larger thing there. A Legio of Titans arrives to help save this planet. The Mechanicus and the Imperium kind of make for difficult partners sometimes, and you see that in this book. You have the Lord Governor versus the Adept Signoris, which is sort of the head AdMech guy, and you see the tensions between, but you also see some of the camaraderie between Mechanicum and Imperium. So you're seeing both sides there, which I think he does really well. So he sets it up for kind of this interesting conflict. There's sort of competing views on the divinity of the Emperor, which has always been this long-running theme within like all Mechanicum fiction. All of it. Like I can't remember one where they haven't had this conversation.
This question.
The gist of it is that there's most of the Mechanicum has ascribed to the belief that the Emperor is the Omnissiah. He is the sort of the omnipotent being that is a god, and he is the Omnissiah. Yes. There's others that don't believe that he is. Like he's separate. He is a human. The Omnissiah is something different than what the Emperor is. Seems kind of like, either way they're both fictional, sort of, or either way they're not something that is involved in their lives, but they are. It's part of their religion, really.
Yeah, yeah. And it reminds me of just thinking about it, it reminds me of like early schisms in the Catholic or the Christian religion, like Middle Ages, even earlier than that. Some of these fundamental questions that they had to ask themselves that ended up splitting things. Yeah. So you could go back to like the Great Schism between the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. A lot of that came down to how much control does the state have and where's the head of the government, right? Yeah. But then if you're thinking about like these theological questions, you got the Protestant Reformation. Yeah. You have, the idea of the Holy Trinity, or are they separate? So why am I bringing in Christian beliefs? Well, because I feel like the Imperium is built in a lot of the same ways as medieval Europe with secular kings and a pope. Yep. And they have similar power structures. They have parallel goals in a lot of ways, but damn do they fight sometimes. Yep, and they do. That is what happens between the Imperium and the Mechanicus.
Yes. Yeah, and it could have been it could have easily been the ecclesiarchy at this point, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But the Mechanicum is just so different, and truthfully, the Mechanicum has always been, the Mechanicus, because now we're post-heresy. The Mechanicus has always been different because the partnership between Mars and Terra have been one of sort of like a mutual benefit thing. They never, the Emperor never conquered Mars. He became a partner of Mars. And then the only world that they basically said, okay, we will just become partners on this thing. So that's what makes it different. I think that's what makes the conflict. This book has a huge cast of characters. There's a civilian in the Hive. There's a civilian who makes little mini Titan toys. All the way up to the Lord Governor and the Adept Signoris and the Titans and all their crew. I mean, we'll talk about the actual characters in a minute, and we won't even touch all of them. There are a lot. A lot. Yeah. This is a big, big book.
It's very Abnett in that way.
Yeah.
He loves getting a lot of different perspectives on the same thing.
He also loves making you care about a character just before he kills him. That's even if it's a character you've never seen before. It's like, oh, here's a new character in a couple pages of like his backstory, just enough to go, okay, this guy's really and now he's dead.
Oh, and he got disintegrated by a Titan's weapon.
So that's classic Abnett. Yes, for sure. The plot weaves through a bunch of different stories, and it's all kind of meant to show not a main character, but an entire forge world at war or colony at war. What I think is interesting about the book is that, so there's an Imperium, there's Mechanicus, there's Legio, there's civilians, there's tank commanders, there's PDF troopers. Those are all the characters. There's no Chaos characters in this.
No.
They're kind of this unseen that's just sort of there to be a protagonist. It's not like you have, here's the main, it never cuts to the main Chaos warlord sitting on a Princeps throne and directing forces.
Here's our dark plan. And,
No, it's not at all.
No,
and in Princeps Gearhart, who's the Red Fury, he's a legendary Princeps, and he's one of the main characters that I think he comes on later, but he's one of my favorites.
Yes.
Because you see him slowly sort of succumbing to the machine spirit of the Titan. He's an older man, and he's sort of slowly losing his humanity a little bit.
Yeah.
So his plot line, I think, is amazing.
Yeah.
It's really, really cool.
Yeah, and I like that both of these books, you get this view of the machine spirit of the Titan as very much its own thing.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, that's what a machine spirit is. It's quasi AI, right? But
it's like a very intelligent animal in a lot of ways.
Exactly.
Right? It's a very smart dog.
They have a personality, they have wants, they have desires, and you see that in these books, which I really like.
I guess it's more than a dog. It's almost like or like an ape or something, or maybe like a dolphin, or a very, very smart animal that is mostly instinctual, but does have some level of things that they prefer. But
absolutely.
Most of it is destroying chaos, or if you're chaos, going the other way. There's Varco, who's a gritty tank commander, and he just basically gets his butt kicked most of the book.
Yeah,
he loses his tank his first battle, and spends most of it trying to get his squad to safety. And Abnett can write the gritty tank commander like no one's business.
He just opens up the file cabinet, flips through the folders, and goes, "Okay, here's a character archetype that I have planned out."
Boom, right there. And his squad. Yeah, as his squad is trying to make its way across the plains. There's a Moderati, Tarsus, who at the very beginning kind of loses his Princeps. Even before the book really gets into it. And he has to learn to work with a new one. Tarsus is kind of an interesting one. He and his Princeps are kind of fighting a little bit, and you can kind of see that conflict.
Yeah, and it's through Tarsus that we get the most insight to what takes place in the in the command of a Titan.
Yeah,
what does it look like? How is it run? What are the the designation of duties? Which sounds very boring until you add the stress of, okay, well, now he and his Princeps aren't going to get along.
Yeah.
And so how does that change? Now that we understand all the workings of the, of the command of a Titan, what happens when that wrench is thrown in there?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of back and forth between the Imperium and Mechanicum. There's a thing that happens that really tests the partnership between the two that happens in the book. And it happens in a kind of an interesting way that I thought was really cool for the book. But that's really, without getting into too much spoilers, that's really essentially it. There's a war on a planet, huge cast of characters that cover the whole range of different characters that might be involved in this. Chaos is more like zombies in a zombie movie.
Yeah,
where they're a threat,
a faceless antagonist.
Yeah, it's there to put pressure on the players. The players themselves, though, there's enough fractures and things where they have to question things, and that's the interesting part, is that how they have to work together or how they fight each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, so what do we think? Would you recommend Titanicus?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So there are a few things that I think this book does really well.
Mm-hmm.
The sense of scale.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Making Titan combat feel interesting.
Yeah.
And intense.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to think about these, kind of plodding monsters of machinery that fire off long range blasts, and eventually their shields take too much damage and they die.
Yeah.
But it's very visceral.
The warhounds felt like warhounds.
Yes.
Like they were fast and they kind of
Absolutely.
skirted, and they were like these little pack animals that sort of that were really, really fast, and they're agile.
Yeah.
You have to chase them down, and they're a threat. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I really liked that. I really enjoyed getting this different, kind of the gamut of perspectives on the battle or on the war, from the very smallest perspective of I'm just trying to survive.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to get to safety, all the way up to, I'm trying to plan victory for an entire world.
Yep.
That kind of stuff. I really like that.
Yep.
I loved that, again, without getting too spoilery, because the traders are Titans. They run all the way back to the Horus Heresy.
Yeah.
And I really love that the book has this element where the Horus Heresy still matters.
Yeah.
It's not just dead history.
Yeah.
When you're fighting forces that took part in it, suddenly it becomes much more immediate.
Yeah.
And then as part of that, I loved that we get a very understandable and just very plausible reason for why history and records from the Horus Heresy are so hard to access.
Yeah.
And so hard to even understand what happened back then. Because, it's one of those things where they start talking about the difficulties of trying to understand some of this code, where they're like, we can't even decipher what is code and what's scrap.
Yeah.
And so I love that idea of what does it look like when you have a records-based institution like the Mechanicum. They have characters that pull up memory files and send them to each other. They can store everything. Well, how does an organization like that forget? Yeah. And this shows how. Yeah. It shows how are things forgotten in the Imperium and in the Mechanicum especially. This book will show you.
Yeah, and also to go off that too, they begin to unearth some things that perhaps they should not have unearthed. Yeah. And that's a big plot point in this book.
Some of these things were forgotten for a reason.
There's a reason why they don't remember them, for sure. I agree. I think it's a good book. I feel like he bites on a little more than he can chew. Yeah. I think there's probably about 3 characters that I get what he's going for, because if you lose some of the smaller characters, it might feel like the book is more of a war-torn thing versus a colony at war. Yeah. But I mean, there's the guy who makes the toys, he's probably got maybe 10 pages total kind of scattered throughout the book. There's one who's a former Moderati who has a little garden to tend to, and he's basically just, he's dementia. Yeah. And it's just his view of things, and you see it doesn't really matter a lot. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. You sort of say, okay, this is what's going to happen to you, but I think he may have been on a little more than they can chew. Not because he's not a good writer, it's just that he didn't have the page length to really go with it. This feels like it could be a 3-part series at this point. I mean, there's enough crunch here to really go nuts with it.
Yeah, and it's a very Abnett book in that he does a lot of these things really well, but he's also going to go back. You kind of already mentioned it, that idea of like, oh, well, I'm going to get you attached to this character and then kill them after 10 pages. That can be really effective, or sometimes it can just kind of ring hollow. Yeah. And there are some choices that he makes in this book that, especially by the end of it, and we'll get into when we talk about spoilers, I'll give a little bit more detail. Some of it's just kind of like, well, we didn't need that. Yeah. I didn't need that to enjoy this book for what I'm getting out of it. Everything that I described as really enjoying, some of these didn't really have a part in that.
Yeah, I think it's a bit bloated.
Yeah, a little bit.
Which is not, it's not really something he's usually much more of a, he's very much an efficient writer, effective but efficient at the same time. So it's interesting. I've never read a book from him that has been a little bit flabby, I guess is the right word. Yeah. Where because he's really good at getting you like the characters, but there's just too many in this respect. So, however, I love the Titan battles because it's like a combination of tank and submarine. To me, that's what it felt like. It felt like it was a real combination of those two.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're slow moving, but they do have some speed. They've got to take time to power the guns up. The Titan battles are amazing, and not because they're battles, but because you're in the cockpits of these things. Never hear the chaos.
No.
It's all about the force of the chaos, and the chaos forces are good. Like they're very effective Titans.
Yeah,
so it's all about how do I get around this?
Yeah,
how do I solve these issues here?
Yeah, and by using the hive world and the scale of a hive world, we don't have. I mean, and there are moments of this, but there are Titans that stage ambushes, that hide, that like that kind of stuff. It's not just big, massive machines on an open field firing at each other. There's a sense of terrain, and of that cat and mouse game of the submarine battle, like you say. There are a lot of parts where the crew's on edge, fingers on the trigger, pretty much ready to whenever we see them, we're going to need to be able to fight.
And it starts off at the beginning as one of the Titans has been refitted, and I think Tarsus says, well, the Auspex is has some ghost elements to it. Just know that it's probably just part of this machine spirit, but that sets it up to how much of this is going to impact the story. And of course, Dan Abnett, he doesn't really waste a lot of that. So he goes with it. I think cut a couple characters out in this book is amazing, but it's also at the same time, this could have been a series. I think he could have actually taken this a little more. So I guess in a way, I'm almost saying like the length could have been longer and he could have done more with it,
or it could have been
shorter and made a bunch more. Yeah, for sure. However, it's a good book.
Yeah.
It's not one of my favorites, but it's a good one.
I think it's, it released in 2008, 2007, something like that. And I think it's stood the test of really being a very influential book in terms of how Titan legions are talked about and viewed.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's talk about Imperator, Wrath of the Omnissiah. Now, this is by Gav Thrope, and he is a really very prolific writer. He writes a lot. He's written books in The Beast Arises, Horus Heresy. He's written The Path of the Eldar, Ynnari, the Aspect Warrior books. He's written a lot of Eldar, so I've read a lot
of the Dark Angels books.
Yeah, I've read a lot of Gav Thrope. He writes pretty much any timeline in any storyline that the library produces. I get him mixed up with Guy Haley a lot because truthfully, to me, the two of them are a lot of similar in that they write a lot and they're very workmanlike.
Yes.
They're very good about executing a sort of a plot. They're not necessarily, the writing doesn't have a real flowery touch to them. It's not necessarily interesting writing, but it's effective.
Yeah.
In some cases, if the plot is good.
Yeah.
So.
And I think this is one of those books.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. This is probably one of my, I will say, I liked his Path of the Eldar books. But then I love Eldar and I liked his take on it. Not as much, some of his Phoenix Sword books are not my favorites. His Ynnari one's not, but he's hit or miss for me. So sometimes he writes some good stuff.
A lot of the times I don't like his take on the Dark Angels.
Yeah.
He and I disagree with kind of how to characterize that.
Yeah.
So, but that's not necessarily something about his writing ability. It's more about how I conceptualize the army compared to how he does.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny at this point, he's written so much for the Dark Angels. It's kind of like, well, I disagree with him. So I'm disagreeing with one of the creators of the Dark Angels in a lot of ways. But I have that ability. I can do that.
Well, sure. I mean, I don't necessarily like I like Salamanders a lot, but the Nick Kine books I'm not a fan of at all. Yeah. And it's almost enough to turn me off the Salamanders just a bit, just because I'm like, I don't know. And it's just me personally, I don't like his take on them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it works that way. But Imperator, I think, actually is a pretty effective story.
Yeah, I think he does really well.
So the story takes place entirely within an Imperator Titan, and it's the Casus Belli. There's a Magos Dominus. I'm going to read his whole name out, and then we'll just go with his actual name. It's Magos Dominus, Militaris, Xanazus, Scitaria, Exilius, Exus, or we'll just call him Exus.
Yeah.
He commands the Scitari inside the Emperor Titan, or the Imperator Titan. There's Gelsa, who's a Tributai, and she works in the Titan, which is funny. The Imperator Titans are the huge Titans.
Yes.
With a church on the back. I mean, they're massive. They're bigger than Warlord Titans. They are the biggest Titans.
Yeah.
So they have these massive, massive machines. And it's interesting that even though the plot takes place within the Titan, it doesn't feel like you're in some claustrophobic thing.
No.
You're just in a city.
Yeah.
It's so big.
Yeah. I mean, so the scale of Imperators has been...
It's been
kind
changed.
of bounced around
Yeah.
a lot. Like it used to only be like 45 meters.
Yeah.
At their smallest. But
Yeah.
I think they're up to, like over 100 meters,
Yeah.
sometimes pushing 200, depending on the, so these are pretty massive things.
Mhm.
And they're wide.
Yeah.
They're big. They're blocky. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of room to play around with here.
Yeah. So, and he takes all of it. He makes use of this space, in that even though it doesn't take place inside of a Titan, Gav Thrope makes the Titan feel big.
Yeah.
Because they have to travel between these areas in the Titan. It's very much, it feels like a huge Titan. But a Tributai, basically, they live and work in the Titan. They turn wrenches. I mean, they're the mass of people that essentially are workers inside it. And they're not slave labor.
Nope.
And they're very proud of their work.
Yes.
They're like blue collar workers that work inside a Titan.
Yeah. And they're recruited from all over the place.
Yeah.
Which I really, I liked that element. But yeah, they have ownership over the Titan in a way, they not individual ownership, but as a group, they're like, this is our home. This is our Titan. And so you see that with, I think she's only been on the Titan for like a few years.
Yeah, Gelsa's like 3 years, I think.
3 years. But she knows everything
Yeah.
about the Titan. She can recognize the sounds. She knows the deck. She knows these little quirks about it that indicate that idea of like, no, they live, they work here, they love it.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, and they how Imperium will say the Emperor protects. Well, they say praise the Omnissiah, right? And again, as we talked about, most of the time that's the same.
Yep.
When it's not, then there's the problems.
Yes.
There's Harkus, who's an Inquisitor, and he comes in the story pretty quickly, and he suspects heresy or a conspiracy within the Titan. And gradually over the course of a battle, because it takes place, even though it takes place inside the Titan is engaged in a battle.
Yeah.
And the battle itself it's kind of a faraway thing. You're not there, he describes scenes of the battle, but the battle itself never reaches the participants inside the Titan.
No.
As far as the big Titan attacks. Now, there are some battles that do happen, and I think that's where it becomes kind of cool.
Yes.
But gradually during the course of the battle, there's a conspiracy, which does get revealed.
Yes.
We don't know what it's about. We won't go into too many spoilers on that. But essentially, there's this conspiracy. That's what Harkus is there for. And Gelsa essentially meets him and teams up to find out what's happening.
Yeah.
Exus is he commands the Scutari, but he's frequently in conflict with the Princeps and the Moderatus, they run the Titan. And they're a little more human than him. So he himself has, what is it? He doesn't even have a human brain. His brain has been completely, it's all basically a machine at this point.
Yeah, he's pushing the envelope of what it means to be an augmented human.
Yes.
Yeah, like the human side is pretty much gone.
Yeah. And they make a big point of saying that Princeps and Moderatus feel more human because they have to be they have to hold on to more of their humanity to control these Titans.
Yeah.
So they make this thing.
It's by design.
Yep.
And I really enjoy the character of Exorcist because we really get a view into what it is like to be a higher level member, not higher, well, kind of a mid-tier level member of the Mechanicum.
Yeah.
And what does that open up to you?
Yeah.
The way that he thinks is different. He's not thinking in human terms.
No.
He's not processing things in human terms.
Yeah.
But even more than that, the way he experiences the world around him. I think this book gave me the best view of what the new sphere is.
Yeah.
That pops up in a lot of different books. Titanicus has it too. But here I feel like I got the best idea of, that's what it's like to be connected to that. That's what it's like to be this augmented human.
Yeah.
You're not human anymore. He doesn't think of himself as
it's like a form of telepathy, but it's mechanical.
Yeah.
Right? It's how they can kind of send signals back and forth.
It's visual. It's sensory. It's not just a data stream. It's they see it, they can touch it, they can feel it, and that's really cool.
When he meets a new Dominus arrives and he sees her, and it feels like you're in an RPG, right? Where it's like, here's her name, here's the stuff, and here's all the stuff about her. Yeah. It's almost like her character card pops up kind of thing. And it does, you're right. It does feel visual in that case. He's also one of the first, he can split his consciousness off. So he'll take like Exus, I can't remember.
Tactical.
Tactical, yeah. He'll split him off to run simulations. And so you really, Gav Thrope did a really good job of making him feel just human enough to be relatable, but he's not at all. And he has I'm going to split off into secondary and tertiary consciousness to run simulations to figure this problem out while I'm doing this. He is not just a single entity. He's a many, many multiple entities at this point.
Yeah, which builds on the idea of Cull having, all of his secondary bodies and stuff like that, So it's something that we've been introduced to before, but now we're getting a in the skull idea of it. You know, what does this look like to be doing it yourself?
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah, it definitely plays on that alien nature of the Mechanicus. It's very different. It's not it's human, but it's not. So much so that even the Dan Abnett's book in Titanicus, because it was written, before they really started to flesh out the lore, his feels more like regular sort of people with mechanical augments. This feels like these are legitimately alienish type creatures. They're not as human as we think. Yes, for sure. And there's, we'll talk about the conspiracy in sort of later when we get to the spoilers here, but that's really pretty much the book. There's the main characters is Exus, and there's Gelsa, and then the Carcass, and how do they figure out this conspiracy within this Imperator Titan? All right, Sean, what do you think?
I liked it.
Yeah,
I liked it a lot. I think some of the things that it does best are, we already talked about that scale of the Titan, making the Titan itself feel really large.
Yeah.
Getting a feel of how much work goes into maintaining one of these, and how much technology is baked into just the simplest of actions in a Titan. I really enjoyed that. I love that you get a sense of locality in the Titan to when, without spoiling too much, when the Titan itself becomes a battlefield. Yeah. You have a feeling of, okay, I understand where they're at.
Yeah.
I understand the location and what the characters are getting at. And then something that I really like about the Inquisitor, I like the characterization of the Inquisitor. He comes in with this attitude of, I am the Imperium's will. Yeah. And he carries that with him the whole time. He has this confidence and this surety to his purpose that an Inquisitor would have to have. Yeah. If you're doubting your abilities or your right, the righteousness of your actions, you're not going to make it as an Inquisitor because you're coming up against the darkest corners of the universe. Yeah. And I loved seeing that attitude run into this tributite that's just like, I'm here to turn wrenches, do my job. Yeah. And you're talking about stuff that I don't even know what's supposed to be going on here. And so seeing that character dichotomy. And then of course, Exorcist, I think really is the star of this book in a lot of ways.
He is. But we say he or she, the Z. There was a little bit of what was interesting about this book is that he goes out of his way to change the pronouns around. And I think he does that very, very intentionally. Yeah. He is not a he or a she. Yeah. It's not a her or a him. It's a vim or a ver. Yeah. Or a v or a viz. And he uses V because he wants to really show that Exus is not, he doesn't have a gender anymore. He hasn't had a gender in years. Yeah. Now there are some Dominus that, or other Mechanicus characters. In fact, all of them have a gender. And Exus actually mentions, oh, well, this Dominus still identifies as this particular gender. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But her or him or V does not. Yeah. I have to admit, it's a little jarring. You're so used to seeing the certain pronouns, but over a while you sort of internalize it.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's one of those things where it's like they're pronouns that I was not personally familiar with. Yeah. In terms of I've never seen these particular ones used. Yeah. But that was okay with me. And you're right. We've been sitting here. I think saying he, which is just incorrect.
Yep, it's actually correct. It's V.
Yeah, it's V. And that's just it's another way to communicate how separated they are from where they started.
Yeah, I think people thought this was a political statement. For those fanboys who perhaps are a little more sensitive to this kind of thing, thought it was a political statement. I absolutely don't think it is at all. In fact, it's just literally it's a literary device to try to really show how weird the Mechanicus is. Yeah. And I think because to me, actually, that pronoun thing is the least weird thing he does. It's the consciousness splitting, which makes him really, really weird.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a point where he adorns his war suit, he calls it. So it's like he steps into this augmented thing that is like really, really powerful. To me, I think it's accurate to provide the pronoun that he did because he really wanted to make sure that everyone understood that this is not a really human person anymore.
Yeah.
So
which is why I really, think that's why Gav created Viz, all these things instead of using they.
Yeah.
Because like non-binary pronoun they is absolutely used a lot. I have friends, I've had students that prefer they.
Yeah.
And absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. But that's not why he used they. He didn't use they to do political. He created a new one because he's saying, look, this is how different they are from where they started.
Yeah.
Not different just from humanity.
Yeah.
Different if Exorcist of a few hundred years ago could meet Exorcist now, they are not the same person at all. Which is really
You're right.
Cool characterization.
You're right. He's using it in really to make him very different. And I think that's what I liked about it the most. I think Exorcist was my favorite.
Yeah.
Not because he was relatable or I just found it really interesting.
Yeah,
I
fascinating.
liked him when he's talking to himself. His different consciousnesses sort of arguing back and forth.
Yeah.
To me, I find that it's really interesting. I like it. Like he doesn't have a character arc, really.
He does.
He does have a character arc. You're right. We'll get to that in the spoilers. I like this book. I think that there's some moments in here that there's some characterizations. I think the Harkus the Inquisitor was a little bit weak in my mind.
Yeah, and I can agree with that.
But I also think he's somebody who, like you said, he's very full of himself. He is definitely we're seeing a side of an Inquisitor that kind of got way over his skis.
Yeah.
Like he got way over, and he's too proud and arrogant to recognize that.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
for that as a character, it made sense. It's just not, I'm not used to seeing Inquisitors not be nearly as good.
Yeah.
You're so used to Eisenhorn.
Yeah.
So I will say Harkus is a little bit, I liked his relationship with Gelsa, but I almost feel like the way they met up feels a little contrived.
Yeah. And there are moments with him, especially where I'm just kind of like, yeah.
You can see that guy, there are some plot mechanics that you can see that in it really good, well told stories, you're not really seeing the gears of the plot move. You can sort of see the gears a little bit here.
Yeah. Yep.
But I will say though, I think as somebody who likes the Mechanicum, I think it was fascinating. It was a good book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really good. All right, well, let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to hear a much more spoiler-filled review of both of these books. But before we do that, let's take a break. Let's hear a word from our sponsor, TraderA.com. If you're like most Warhammer players, you own a ton of models. At one time, you had big plans for these models, but now they just kind of sit, gathering dust, unused and unloved. It's time to clean out your closet of shame. Visit TraderA.com and get cash for your used models. Trader A is run by Captain A, someone who's been in the community a long time and has done a lot to grow the hobby. He's also a personal friend of the show. Unopened boxes, models on a sprue, half-built models, primed, painted, even bits have value. The process is simple. Send him a list of what you have, he'll send you a quote, you pack it up, send in your stuff, and he'll get you cash. You can shop around, but you're going to find that Trader A gives you 40% more than the other guys. You want it quick, you want to get rid of it, visit TraderA.com. Get cash to buy the stuff that you really want. TraderA.com. Sell your models and get your cash quick and easy. Okay, and we're back. So let's carry on what we did before. Let's talk about Imperator, Wrath of the Omnissiah. So the Casus Belli is actually from Legio Metallica. It's an Imperator class Titan, and there's an attack force of 6 Warlords, 3 Reavers, and 3 Warhounds, and a Skitarii force. So it's a massive Titan force.
Yeah.
And they're given the mission to take on this stronghold. And this chaos stronghold, and the mission is like, this stronghold will fall by night. Yeah, and so that is their mission. Exus is the tech priest, and he sees the Skitarii troops. There's Princeps, there's Moderati Prime, Gevern, there's Moderati Secundus. All the Moderatus basically have a human appearance. And the first part of the book, Exus and the Moderatus are sort of arguing back and forth.
Yeah, they don't like him.
No.
They're derisive.
Yeah, to the point where it got a little annoying. Like, okay, all right, we get it.
Yeah.
You find out a little more why later, because it turns out, well, we'll talk about that in a second. They are very derisive towards him. He's in charge of the Skitarii, and they spend a big chunk of the book saying, well, or a big chunk of the first part of the book, your Skitarii won't be needed in this battle.
Yeah.
Right? We have enough Titans. We don't really need your little guys running around. And Exus is like, no, they might be needed. We're kind of introduced to them going back and forth, and they're kind of scornful of his ideas, and it's kind of that back and forth argument. And then Exus is starting to realize this battle's going weird. It's not going the way it should be going.
Yeah, there are choices being made that I don't understand.
Yeah, so there's this as Kalak, which is the Chaos Stronghold, what they're seeing during the battle is that this stronghold has some very powerful weaponry, and in fact, it even has I think like a satellite, a beam from outer space, right? But all of the weaponry is attacking everything except the Imperator Titan.
Yeah.
And Exus doesn't understand why they're doing this, because at some point he goes, like, they've got macro cannons, they've got weapons that could hurt this Titan, and he's not sure why they keep doing it, why they're going against everything else.
Yeah, they're targeting the Warhounds and the Warlords and the Reavers. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where he starts to kind of question, like, wait a minute, why are we doing this? This doesn't make any sense. And that's kind of that back and forth.
Yeah. Well, and Exus as a character, he starts the book, and this is why I push back on the idea that he doesn't have a character arc. He starts very logic driven, which you would expect for a Mechanicum character.
Yeah.
But he's a stick in the mud in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
He does his predictions, he does his, and the Princeps and the Moderati are commenting on this. This is one of the reasons why they deride him, is this idea of he's so stuck in the numbers of things.
Yeah.
And throughout the book, when he starts running into this doesn't match the numbers, he begins having the Mechanicum version of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Right? This is what should be happening. This is what is happening. What's going on?
Yeah.
And that's when we start seeing him start to split for new purposes.
Yeah.
It used to just be, okay, I have a tactical side that's going to handle, driving the battle while I'm concentrating on strategy, and then it becomes he creates a Exus, and I cannot remember the name that he gives it, Exus like antagonist, pretty much, where he's like, okay, your job is to think as the enemy. What is the enemy doing? And that split ends up being I feel like the catalyst for his career, or for his character growth. He ends up, by the end of the book, gaining a sense of intuition, which he never had before.
And not only that, at the very end of the book, he lies.
Yeah.
And you're right. That is his character arc.
Yeah.
He learns to weirdly think a little more like the enemy in some ways. He lies in such a way, he wasn't a complete lie. It was like 80% or something, but he made it feel like it was 100%. And that is what sort of saves the day. So you're right. You're absolutely right. His arc is, you're right, he's a stick in the mud. He's like, here's the numbers, what's going on? And you do feel like he's kind of annoying. It's like, oh, dude, shut up, Exus. Our Titans are doing fine. What are you complaining about?
He's a nerd.
Yeah.
Right? He's a nerd for the Mechanicum.
Yes,
they mock him as a nerd.
Yeah. Way too numbers driven, not creative. Right? That's what they're saying. Yeah. Gelsa is a Tributai, and she's an augmented human. So we have to point out that she's not just a normal human. She's been augmented for strength because she's got to turn wrenches on this thing, right? Literally wrenches. She's got a wrench that she walks around with, or
her trusty wrench.
Yeah, it's not called a
hydro
wrench.
Spanner.
Yeah, it's a hydro spanner or something like that.
Something like that.
She's lived in there for 3.5 years, and a bunch of other people. And we first see her playing a dice game, and she loses at it. And you sort of see, okay, here's the working class that keep the Titans moving. They're not slaves. They're very proud of their work, and they worship the Omnissiah. But because she's not born on the Forge World of Metallica, she can't rise beyond the rank of Tributai. So that's her station in life. And she's not unhappy about it. She just recognizes this is kind of what I'm doing.
She's never going to reach the, I can't remember what the next class is. But the higher deck workers.
The higher deck workers, she's during a maintenance task, she runs across to Hyperzia.
Oh, yeah, that's the higher class.
They're tech priest kind of enforcers, and they're beating somebody up at the malls. She interferes with them, and it turns out that Harkus is getting beat up. And she interferes because she's like, well, what are you? Because he's dressed in robes, and it's unusual for enforcers to just beat somebody up. So she stops him because she's like, well, wait a minute, because, this doesn't happen on
you don't have the authority to be judge, jury, and executioner here.
So she sort of makes him, it's weird. She sort of interferes. She doesn't beat them up, but she sort of stops them from beating her. So they leave, and she meets Harkus, who's the Inquisitor, who's been kind of ruffled up. And he basically says, I'm an Inquisitor. And at first, this is where the book is a little weird. I think it was a little strange. Like, she sees them kind of beating up. She goes in, she intervenes, and, oh, by the way, I'm an Inquisitor. And he's like, well, you can either you just stop them doing this thing. So if I am a chaos agent, then you'll be implicated. But it's a weird, convoluted logic of why she goes with him.
Yeah, it's one of those cases of like, well, who do you believe?
Yeah.
Do you believe the power structure that you've been operating under for these few years that have declared me as a heretic?
Yeah.
Or do you believe that I'm an inquisitor? And by my own word, I don't have my sigil.
He's lost his sigil.
He's lost his sigil.
Yeah.
I don't have my sigil.
Yep.
But if you don't believe me and you turn me in,
Yeah.
then what I believe will happen, and it's going to be terrible.
Yeah.
If you do believe me and I'm wrong, then you're assisting me in, in heresy.
Yeah.
Right? And so it becomes a character conflict for her.
Yeah.
And I can see why Gav wanted to set that up.
Yeah.
You're right, it is a little contrived.
A little contrived. It would have been nicer. I don't know how it would have been a better way.
Yeah.
I feel like if they really wanted to kill him, they would have done a better job. It felt like he was in a weird kind of danger and she itself she's not a fighter, but she's augmented. And then there's some cases where she becomes a fighter. And I feel like maybe they didn't say that. They could have given her some kind of backstory. Maybe she was she knows how to fight somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, I gotcha.
But yeah. And there's a conflict there because she basically agrees to get his sigil back. So he's lost his sigil. An Inquisitor without a sigil, by the way, you recognize in this book right away, they don't have any authority. They're just a dude.
No. Yeah.
Just a guy.
Yeah. Well, and this is where the weakness of Harkis as a character comes up a little bit. He's so tunnel visioned on the sigil.
Yeah.
So tunnel visioned.
Yeah.
And there's
if that's going to make everything better.
Right. And how, when you brought up that criticism, I go, yeah, because it's one of those things. It's like, if you believe what is happening, then you getting your sigil isn't going to mean anything.
Yeah. And I think you recognize this is why Inquisitors have retinues.
Yeah.
Where is his retinue at? Yeah. Clearly he was brand new, tossed out there. He really needed some backup.
Yeah, he really does seem like he's pretty new on the job.
He's very, very new. So they spend a lot of time kind of traveling the Titan, and I think this is some of my favorite moments in the book where they go outside.
Oh, yeah.
She hasn't been outside in 2 years, and so she sees the unfolding battle because they have to travel from like part of the plasma arm or something. I mean, the Titan's huge, but there's a part where they have to go outside to grab onto.
They don't have access to some decks, so they have to climb the ladders on the outside.
And it's actually it's impressive.
Yeah,
and she sees it and she's amazed at first of all, she has fresh air, is brand new, but I love the idea that they keep going back to the fact that this Titan is massive and it's powerful.
Yeah,
and it's huge
and it's deadly to you without intending to be.
Yes,
if you're in the wrong place, you're dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a massive piece of machinery. Don't get caught in it. Yeah.
So during the battle, there is a battle on the parapets, and the parapets, of course, again, the Imperator Titans have these huge church-like structures. Exus Tactical has a war skin, and he's leading the Scutari and the Electro Priests. It's kind of where you kind of get to there's my model, the Electro Priests are involved in this battle where he kind of name checks units.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of the other authors kind of describe them. They don't necessarily call them
by
priests,
by the tabletop.
So yeah. But there's a Noise Marines that are disembarking and kind of boarding the top of the Titan. And I think this is actually kind of a cool battle. The Noise Marines are using a lot of sonic weaponry. The Scutari are fighting back. It's kind of this back and forth that goes from the parapets into sort of the atrium of the Titan.
Yeah.
It actually kind of keeps expanding. So these Titans are so big that troops can land on top of them and fight.
Yeah. They stage boarding with like multiple transports at a time.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah. So in really, I think what you find out is that the reason why the Chaos Forces have, first of all, they're not using their heavy weaponry on the Titan. They're battling the Titan in order to fight these Scutari on the Titan. They're going to go after Exus, his crew, his warriors.
Yep.
And there's a reason for that, because we find out, of course, that the conspiracy for the Titan is to turn it over to Chaos Forces.
Yes.
And that is, by taking over the Scutari, they can control the inside of the Titan.
Yep.
And that's it becomes more clear to us as the reader. Exus takes a lot longer to get there because, again, he's not human.
And he has this trust that everybody's working for the good of the Titan.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But anyways, during the battle, it kind of spills into the Arcopolis. Acropolis, yeah.
Acropolis.
Gelson and Harkis are actually kind of attacked, but they're sort of saved by these tunnel fighters, Dazzy and Azad.
Yeah.
And I love them because they are from Armageddon. They're vent rats. They're tunnel fighters. And again, there's this third faction that live inside this Titan that, I don't know, they don't live in the tunnels, but they're used to fighting in tunnels because they were from Armageddon, and they are there to sort of augment the Skitarii.
They remind me of like the Titan's immune system.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Right? Like they're able to get anywhere they need to go through all these vents and stuff, and they're highly deadly.
Yeah.
But they can't be overwhelmed.
Yep. Yeah. But they're there, and they're very, very loyal.
Yes.
Right? And that's where that's where Chaos, I don't know that, maybe they didn't know they existed. They existed. It was kind of like, oh, why, here they are. But it doesn't feel like the Dominus understands that these people exist inside the Titan.
Which is consistent with how they behave throughout the book. They only focus on the top level Titan kind of level stuff.
Yeah.
And they disregard the Skitarii are a tool. They're unimportant.
Yeah.
You know, and when you get the new Dominus Ulvacia, you know, she's being brought on with all of her Skitarii just to help the takeover happen.
Yep.
Just to help this process. But the conspiracy is not turn everybody to chaos.
Yeah.
It's replace the top echelon of leadership and turn that level to chaos.
Yeah.
And it won't matter what happens anywhere else. The Titan itself will be a chaotic Titan.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Which is because they introduce code in order to dominate the machine spirit and corrupt it.
Yep.
But again, the Imperator Titans are so big, there's a lot of people on board that are faithful. In fact, most of them are.
Yep.
And they have to bring in a separate Skitarii force to subdue it.
Yes.
So the Chaos Marines are fighting, and they take down a lot of the Exodus Skitarii. And in the meantime, Gelsa, they find his sigil. They find the Hyperzia that took it.
The magic sigil.
They found this sigil.
And how much good does it do for Harkis?
Not at all, because the new Skitarii, Olvadia, she identifies as female origin, and this is kind of what we're talking about, the new sphere thing. And they say Olvadia, she still identifies as she, herself. She takes over, and she basically, there's this debate between her and Exus, and she essentially says, I'm here to bolster your ranks. And Exus is like, okay, but wait a minute, why are you here? You don't need to be here. They do this like tactical exercise outside of actually battling, because Exus goes, well, I could threaten to, I don't have to give you control of my Skitarii. And she's like, well, if you do that, then I'll fight you. And it happens outside of it. And Exus goes, okay, I can't win this battle. So here you go. Here's your control.
Yep.
And it's funny how this is how Mechanicus could fight. They could just literally just fight this way.
Yeah.
They don't actually quote unquote fight. They just run the numbers.
Yep.
So
it's like when you're in a game and you start math hammering out stuff.
Yeah, that's what it felt like to me. It's like, well, all right, I'm lost. Harkis meets up with Olvadia, and he shows her the sigil, and he says, he throws off his cloak and says, I am an Inquisitor, and I have this sigil.
And as the Dominus, it's your responsibility to help me root out the heretics.
You were the Dominus. It's unfortunate he didn't find it and go to Exus.
Yep.
He may have gotten a little better response. Olvadia basically just disintegrates him into nothing.
Yeah, declares him a heretic, disintegrates him.
So much so there's nothing left of him.
Yeah.
And Gelsa's like, did he exist? Like, he's just gone. Like, she saw him gone. He's gone.
Yep.
So then there's this revolt, right? Because she knows, okay, something obviously is going on here, and there's a battle between the Tributai and the new Skitarii.
Yeah.
Exus is able to make contact with Gelsa through an unauthorized new sphere link, and essentially she frees him, and then the battle is on between the forces inside the Casus Belli. And what I really like is that Exus and Olvadia debate again, because Exus is able to control his Skitarii again. And he says, with the Skitarii plus the Tributai plus the Tunnel Rats, all these forces, there's a certainty that I'm going to win. And Olvadia goes, okay, you're right. You're going to win. And she terminates herself.
Yeah.
And this is where he lied.
Yes.
He fudged the numbers just a little bit. And one of his secondary consciousness goes, that wasn't quite accurate. And he goes, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah. And I love this moment because both the reason that he's able to escape and the reason why he's able to get Olvadia to self-terminate is the idea that they, being the Princeps, the Moderatus, and Olvadia, are used to him only being a numbers guy.
Yep.
He only speaks the numbers. He only says 100% logical truth.
Yep.
And so when he starts breaking out of that with this Exus secondary and Exus tactical and all these different new growth, then he's able to abuse that
Yeah.
perception of him.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a cool moment. That's a very cool moment.
Yeah, and so during this time, the Casus Belli is being infected with scrap code, like corrupted scrap code to take it over. Exus actually has to go directly interface with it.
Yeah.
And to battle this code, but in the process, he loses himself. Like
Yeah.
he becomes part of the Casus Belli in order to take over and remove the scrap code.
Yep.
So he does not exist anymore. He's sort of part of the machine spirit.
Yeah, it's a moment of apotheosis.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
he ascends into something where he's part of something else.
And it's interesting because during the book, they keep saying is it must be amazing to feel the power of this thing. And you feel it when Gelsa's walking along the arm that shoots, you know, or you're walking along and you can feel it in certain moments, but to be plugged directly into it, there's moments where they say, what would it like to feel the power of this thing?
Yeah.
And Exus sort of becomes that thing.
Yeah.
Like he becomes part of the machine spirit.
Yeah, well, and it's so powerful that for unaugmented or barely augmented humans, getting a few seconds of it is like the rush of the best drug you've ever had.
Yeah. Because it's so much power.
Yeah.
Gelsa and her force of Skitarii, robots, Armageddon troopers, blah, blah, blah. I hear ragtag force that eventually beats down the rest of the Skitarii. They finally get to the Holy Deck, and they kill the main conspirator, who was Gevrin.
Yep.
And he's the Moderatus Prime. Yep. The Princeps was sort of captured.
Yeah.
I don't know how a Princeps is... I don't know how that works. I feel like the Princeps would be the first person in complete control.
Oh, it's the scrap code they introduced.
Yeah. That
allows
how
them to get around the Princeps.
To get around that. I think Dan Abnett sort of reinforces the idea in his book that Princeps of Warlord and or Titans are in the containers and the cages and the tanks. They're in those watery tanks because that's what they have to do to directly
the amniotic
interface.
Fluid.
In this one here, she's just a human, so it feels like that's a little bit of a weird lore discrepancy.
Oh, I hadn't even really realized.
She walks and talks like a normal human. She's like a pilot. So I don't know. Not to be the complete lore nerd, but part of me is like, well, wait a minute, she should be in a container, in a fluid-filled tank.
Okay, you ready for me to try to argue for it?
Sure.
Because imperators are built on a higher level of sophistication and technology than warlords and warhounds and reapers,
maybe.
Which makes them more valuable. That's why they're so valuable. That's why there would be this whole conspiracy and all of these chaos forces working together just to capture one. Maybe it doesn't need the tank.
Or maybe it doesn't. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good point.
But yeah, no, I hadn't even noticed that.
Either way, but I mean, the Princeps is very more human than the Princeps in Dan Abnett's novels.
Yes.
Which is kind of the interesting thing about it.
Yep.
At the end of the novel, Gelsa's offered a chance to be a tech priest. She goes, well, you could raise, despite not being from Forge World Metallica, but she turns it down to be, this is what you're talking about, the second level up from Tributai, which is the Epeltats.
Yeah.
Epeltas. Yeah, something like that. But at the very end, an Inquisitor who was a mentor to Harkis shows up and asks her to work with him, and that's the end of the book.
Yep.
So, kind of the themes. I mean, the action takes place in a single location, but it's so big that there's lots of locations. It never feels constrained by that.
No.
It's kind of has that hero's journey, the classic hero's journey with Gelsa.
Yeah.
Her
goes from a non-fighter
to non-fighter.
Doesn't really think for herself in terms of pondering these questions to by the end of it, she's making decisions, giving orders even in some ways. So
The Inquisitor is kind of her mentor who pushes her on the journey. She has an ally with Exus to defeat Chaos.
Yeah.
There really isn't a main villain in the story, though. There's more like the rough outlines of a conspiracy and sort of these things that are kind of in the way.
Yeah.
So it's not...
Moldatia is probably the closest to get to a true villain in the story.
Yeah. What I really like, though, is that there's this insidiousness of heresy. A simple change in thinking can turn a tech priest into a heretic. And I think that was interesting, is Alvadia is like, well, no, the Eightfold Path is the true way.
Yeah.
She's not buying into a whole, like, all of the, the Chaos Gods as these emotional things. She's like, well, this is just another logical extension of this is a better way. I can learn more this way.
Exactly.
I'm unencumbered by the shackles of the Mechanicus or the Imperium. I can do whatever I want.
I can achieve more understanding, and new technologies, and new ways of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely.
And I think that was an interesting theme that kind of always runs through all Mechanicus novels. Is like, or frankly all novels is the push to chaos doesn't take much.
No,
it's just a little bit here and there, and you can sort of fall down this path.
Yeah. Yeah, so. And I like it that for the Mechanicum, the draw of chaos isn't necessarily power or wealth or anything like that. It's just knowledge.
Knowledge.
It's knowledge, and then it's achieving new knowledge, because the Mechanicum is so repressed in terms of what they're allowed to do, what they're allowed to pursue. They make a discovery, and then that discovery is going to be debated for hundreds of years of whether or not they can use it.
Yeah.
If you're in that kind of a society, but you have all of these abilities, how attractive is it to be presented you can do whatever you want.
Sure. You
want to try something? Try it.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely makes sense why they would go for that.
It parallels, of course, the thing is it's evil, right? It's a dark path.
Oh, totally.
But back in the day, they would have thought that about anybody who was pushing knowledge that wasn't sanctioned,
absolutely.
Unsanctioned knowledge. The Mechanicus, of course, is more of a scientist organization in many ways, but it has so much of the religious underpinnings that we've already talked about.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That's 40K.
Yep.
For sure.
Yep.
I don't know. What are some favorite moments from the book? What are some things you appreciated most about that book?
Definitely, we already mentioned Exus's internal dialogues, not monologues, dialogues. But also I love the glimpses of the machine spirit that you get. Those few moments where you can really kind of get an idea of what it is.
Yeah.
It's not just a program.
Yeah.
It's not just something running the background things. And then there are a lot of moments, I think, with like the Skitarii and other lower level of the Mechanicum's military that I feel like really flesh out the idea of what they're like.
Yeah.
I got a lot more understanding of what it means to be a Skitarii and controlled by a tactical mind telling you what to do, where to go, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then also, even just the Cataphrons.
Yeah. The Cataphron robots. Yeah. The holy ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's cool. It's really cool to see those. So definitely some of those glimpses.
I think Gelsa as a character is a little dull. She there are moments of doubt. There are moments where she's not sure, but she has faith in the Omnissiah. She doesn't do anything ridiculous, though. So most of the stuff is kind of within the range of what she's capable of. They don't have moments where she's so overpowered that she is able to do these massive things because she believes in it. They don't push it to that point.
Yeah.
She's okay. She's somebody to root for, though. She never feels like somebody who's just too boring and bland.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You want to see her succeed.
Yeah. I think Exus is my favorite character. Him and Olvadia, truthfully, I think the two of them could have debated and fought, and I think I would have enjoyed.
Yeah, that interaction was really.
That interaction was my favorite. I think for sure. Okay, so I think we both recommend it. Just for sure.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Titanicus now. Titanicus is a colony of Orestes is under assault. There's a force of 49 engines or Titans are diverted to save this colony. 49's a lot.
It is. It's a
engines.
massive. It's a whole legio.
Yeah, it's an entire legio. It's a Mechanicus colony. The Imperial governorship is Imperium, but it works alongside. They live together, but there's always a little sense that the Mechanicum is more loyal to Mars. In fact, the Lord Governor at one point says, Mars is who they report to.
Yeah.
Like we can kid ourselves, but they would do anything they needed to do if Mars told them to do something different.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That always is that sense. It's always there. The cast of characters, and we're leaving some of these off.
Yeah,
right? But we'll run through these real quick.
Because you didn't even mention. I don't think you mentioned the head Skitarii.
They didn't even do that. No.
Yeah, the Skitarii commander. He's too.
Yeah. There's a Lord Governor.
Yep.
Etta Severin, who's the consular officer, who's assigned to be the Legio, which is the eyes and ears of the governor. She's assigned to be with the Legio.
Yep.
Severin's really cool. Her and Major Gotch. Gotch is her bodyguard. He's like an old PDF trooper, Royal Honor Guard guy.
Yeah.
And the two of them have kind of this fun, flirtatious relationship. They're both like 30s, 40s. They've seen some stuff.
Yeah, they're both experienced.
They're both
grizzled
experienced
in their own way.
Grizzled, and they're sort of, they're like like older couple, kind of flirting with each other. I appreciated the two of them.
Yeah.
I liked that interaction.
I did too.
But they're Imperium, and they're there to keep an eye on things to make sure. Okay, are we still going to be okay here?
Yeah.
Under the Mechanicus, there's an adept Feist, who works in Analyticae, who is very much like one of those guys who just wants to do best. And he comes up with the idea that like these Chaos Titans are old. Can we open the seal to the vault to look at old records from the Horus Heresy? Because we might find some things that match.
Yeah.
And it does work.
Yep.
They're able to track these Titans down to even before the heresy and all the way back to when they were built. And they see weaknesses in the Titans from way back.
Yeah, old trials and battles and tests and stuff like that.
That they were able to exploit during the battle. Yeah. Adept Vice is super cool. He's got a boss, Magos Egan. Famulus Enhort is the Adept's right hand. And Magos Ptolemy, and then the Adept Signoris Emmanuel. And he's the head guy.
Yeah.
That's the Mechanicus side. The Legio, there's Moderati Tarsus, and he's interesting because he lost his Princeps at the very beginning.
Yep.
They were so it was his Titan, it was a warlord, Vicatrix, and it is actually damaged, and his Princeps is injured, but he thought he was going to be healing during this voyage to Orestes.
Yeah, he was put into stasis, so he shouldn't have been getting worse. And he was still alive when he got put into stasis, and he's, and he should be able to be saved.
Yeah, and he wakes up and the Princeps is dead.
Yep.
And you get the sense that Tarsus is really torn up. Like his Princeps was somebody very important to him.
I mean, he commits murder when somebody says that his Princeps just gave up.
Yeah, he just gave up. He's like, well, he's not a coward. And he flips out and kills him. Yeah. I liked his passion there. Like Tarsus he doesn't mess around. He has a new Princeps though that is assigned to him on Orestes, and that's Prinzhorn, who's never been in combat before, but has done great jobs in simulations. You see the setup here.
Yes. Yes.
And he's incredibly arrogant.
Yeah, he's like, I have 180 successful campaigns or something like that, and then Tarsus realizes they're all simulated. He's never been in the heat of battle.
Never. And he comes from a different Forge world. They're both Mechanicus, but he's coming from this Forge world.
Yeah, Tempestus.
Yeah.
Legio Tempestus.
The difference is that this particular Mechanicus force in Orestes, Tarsus has a little bit of a back and forth of like, oh, you believe in more the new way. The new way meaning that the Emperor is not the Omnissiah.
Yes.
He may still be divine, but he's not the Omnissiah.
Yeah.
And at first it's kind of just this back and forth, but there's always going to be that schism there between the Legio forces and the Mechanicum or the Mechanicus that was already there.
Yeah, and they generally agree on most everything else.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like, in most circumstances, both sides are able to well, this is just an intellectual debate.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Believing this new way doesn't make you a heretic. It doesn't make you, it's okay. It's just intellectual debate. This isn't going to matter. Yeah. This book is where it matters, though.
Yeah.
Because new information is going to come up that will make it less of an intellectual debate and more of a, here's proof.
Yep, here's proof, and here's also proof where if you believe this, then you are a heretic at that point.
Yes.
There is an executor, Crucius, who's the ambassador. He has mostly human looks, and I like the fact that Mechanicum will augment their people to look more human if they're needed to work with humans.
Yeah.
If there's a reason for them to look human, they will make sure they look human.
Yeah, so he's very cultured and attractive and sophisticated in speech and mannerisms, and he gets emotional responses in a way that, if you have a beep boop and tech priest come up and try to talk with an imperial governor, it's not going to go nearly as well.
Yeah, and because humans can't use the noosphere.
Yeah.
They can't speak in binary. They don't can't in binary, so they have to speak with their normal voices. But yeah, so the Crucius is the he's the ambassador. He works a lot with Gotch and Severin. They spend most of the book sort of monitoring the battle from afar, and they kind of see the things that are happening.
Yeah, which is an interesting part of the book, but also maybe one of those parts which is a little bit longer than it needs to be.
Didn't really need it. In fact, they spend a lot of time on his crawler observing the battle, but you don't actually need that point of view as you think about it. I mean, I like the character of Severin and Gotch. They were really cool.
Yep.
Because they're really not just human, but they're grizzled humans, which are some of the best characters.
Yeah.
But you're right. They don't serve the plot at any moment.
Yeah, I feel like they're used to build the theme of the Imperium and Mars having this kind of sometimes rocky, sometimes uneasy alliance.
Yeah.
And so there are things that he does for the book, definitely. Maybe could have been done a little bit more concisely.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. It's unfortunate, though. Like I said, Severin and Gotch are my favorite characters, really.
Yeah,
and,
they did great.
Actually, Princeps Gearhart is my favorite. He's the Red Fury, and he pilots a Warlord Titan.
Yeah, famous, just...
Famous, he's starting to lose it.
Yeah.
And he keeps referring to his Moderatus by their names, and they keep going, why do you keep calling us? he needs
by the wrong name.
Yeah, he needs to keep calling them their names and trying to remember. And he'll forget a name. He goes, "No, sir, my name is such and such." And he remembers, "Oh, that was a Moderatus from like decades ago that I served with."
Yeah.
He needs to hold on to his humanity.
Yeah, he speaks with his mouth instead of canting because it's everything is this desperate pushback, and he had seen it happen to his own princeps. He had seen this subsuming of himself of
in the
this old
machine,
princeps into the machine, and so he really tries to focus on all of these different things to keep his humanity. And by the end of the book, it doesn't work.
Yeah,
He's done.
Yeah, but in the way out, he's bad.
Yeah,
badass.
Oh yeah,
he does a lot of damage to the Chaos Forces, and he's aggressive in the right ways. So there's so much good action with him. Like, there's ordinary citizens and soldiers. So there's Varko, as we talked about, as a tank commander and his crew, and one of his crew includes an engine seer.
Yeah,
and at the small squad level, you can see how humans and Mechanicus forces can work together. Between a human tank commander and an engine seer, and squad from different worlds, how they all work together really, really well. So this is kind of the example of like when it works well, it works really, really well.
Absolutely.
So there's Callie Samstag and her husband Stefan. Callie is a tertiary reserve of the PDF.
Yeah,
who's called up to fight.
Yeah, she like has almost no training whatsoever.
None.
Very little. She goes on like weekend exercises.
Yeah,
but she's not prepared for battle.
Not even the National Guard level.
Yeah.
I mean, she's way down there, right? She gets called up. That's how bad things are, and she spends most of the book. Her first outing, they get wiped out by Skitarii forces, dark Skitarii forces,
which are cool,
and it's super cool. Yeah, they're really, really vicious
murder
things.
Bots.
They're murder bots. Yeah, and she spends the rest of it with her sort of ragtag squad trying to survive as well. And I think that's meant to humanize the citizens of the Hive.
Yes.
So Varko is he's a soldier. Callie is not, and her husband basically spends most of the book like, where is she? Like, he doesn't know anything about her. Like, it's weird that she got called up and he didn't, because he actually is a worker and she had to. There's a whole reason why she had to serve.
Real talk, he's my least favorite character in this book.
He doesn't do anything.
He's so just
there's like, a pointless part where he accidentally kills somebody and he's wanted for whatever. It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, and then he like builds this up in his head that everybody's looking for him, and so it's like it's just supposed. I know that
it's supposed to humanize Callie.
Yeah, and he wanted to be a tragic story, for this Stefan, that he's so afraid of judgment that he actually ends up getting himself killed by being afraid of like it's pretty much like he's wanted for murder. He's really not.
Yeah,
he thinks he is. But he thinks he gets stopped in a traffic stop.
Does he get killed? I can't remember if he gets killed.
Yeah, and then he resists arrest and dies.
Oh, yeah.
And so then when she survives the whole thing and she comes back to an empty house and then gets
that's right.
The notice that her husband was stopped in a routine stop and got resistant and tried to run and got shot.
I forgot about that. It was like, I'm like, okay.
Right, but it was just like it's Abnett trying to humanize, trying to demonstrate a lot of different things about the society they live in, but I got done with it and I'm just like, I never liked the guy.
Yeah, I don't care about him. Like, yeah.
Even from Callie's perspective, he is presented as whiny.
Yeah.
He's presented as whiny and weak-willed.
Yeah, that's true.
And so there's really no ever tragedy there, because the whole time you're reading about him, you're just kind of like, dude, come on.
Yeah.
So her story is a little bit more effective. I like that idea of that
her and her ragtag band.
Yeah.
I think you're right. She didn't need a husband.
No.
In fact, she could have had a parent to come home to.
Yeah.
Or something. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
Right.
But at the same time, like, they rescue a princeps right near the end of the book.
Yeah.
And I really expect that that's going to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? Like, in fact, I was almost doing them like, okay, we have a Legio Invicta Titan with a Tempestus.
Yeah.
Heretic princeps eventually. Maybe they're going to put that princeps in there, but then it kind of goes nowhere.
Yeah. Their plot lines just kind of end.
Yeah.
Like the plot lines.
They save the princeps and then they're done.
These aren't even tertiary plot lines. These are the 5th level plot lines.
Yeah.
Like they're something that's important to the book. Their characters are interesting.
Yes.
And so Varko, for example, is just trying to survive. And he gets word of this tower that's broadcasting something. He sees this force of Titans that he has to that's being cloaked or something. And he has to sacrifice. I don't know if he sacrifices himself.
He doesn't.
His crew ends up doing it. It's one of those suicide type quote unquote missions.
Yeah.
To expose these fact that there's this chaos force that people need to battle. But Varko's cool. Callie, I'm like, okay, I get it. She's a citizen, but they didn't
those two storylines seem to cover a lot of the same ground for me.
They did, and they didn't meet up.
Yeah.
Like I kept expecting them to, but I'm like, oh, they don't really. There's nothing going on here.
Yeah,
they just sort of end. Yeah,
I felt like Callie's storyline, most of it, there are some really great parts, like the murder bots, and then them witnessing a Titan battle on the ground.
Yeah, that's cool.
Super cool. A lot of those things, like there are some cool moments there, but in general, I kind of felt like she was redundant.
Yeah,
and I don't like, not as a character, her plot line was.
Yeah,
to where Varco, his plot line shows what does the outsides of a hive look like.
Yeah,
right? Like what does the world around a hive? What do the wastes around a hive look like? And so you get a lot of the culture, and I really loved that. I loved a lot of the nomadic culture, and he meets a local and talks to a local, and they go to a local kind of like rest area where you learn about this kind of buttering, leave what you can, kind of an idea. And those are really cool moments, and then you kind of get.
You get the same with Callie,
yeah. You're kind of getting a lot of the same things, but not even as well. And so that's one of my criticisms of the book. There.
Yeah, it's interesting. You think about like Guy Haley and Imperator. You see some of the plot mechanics turning a little bit. Mm-hmm. This one here, there isn't a whole lot of plot. It's like the characters are sort of moving along.
Yeah,
they're making decisions that a character might make, but I almost feel like there should have been more of a reason for it, but at the same time, it's almost like trying to give you a feeling of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? And that seems to be his big focus is I want to give you the war from the top level to the bottom level.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen him a little bit more connected sometimes.
Yeah, some more, I hate to say more plot.
Yeah, well, yeah, but
but in a way, I feel like you kind of need some of it,
If Varco and Callie's group had combined, and then Callie had that moment of really rising to the level of heroism as a third level PDF, along with Varco, this grizzled, we've used that word a lot, this very experienced, veteran, confident commander, that would have given us, because we see her growth. We see her grow into this command
more of a leader.
That she becomes
a leader. Yeah.
But then seeing her pair up and meet his level and be part of that last push and have her ragtag band be part of that last sacrifice, that could have been really satisfying.
Yeah, I think even if she didn't meet up with him, if she had something interesting to do,
if saving the Princeps had some material
reason
or something.
Yeah,
like that.
It was like she did this thing at the very end. It was kind of like her squad did. We're like, okay,
yeah.
Varco had a real reason to do what he did.
Yeah,
Yeah. There's also Zember, who's the one who owns a toy shop and builds little miniature Titans.
Cool.
And at some point, when the Titans show up to save the world, his business goes really well. But at another point, when the Mechanicum, there's a civil war somewhat going on. His Titans are not as well received. That's okay.
That's it.
Yeah. Luckily, not a whole lot of time. Just
10 pages max.
Yeah. The Moderati Zinc, I think, was more interesting. He tends a little garden in his retirement. He doesn't know the day. He's obviously suffering from dementia. He, I think, was a little more cooler because he's sort of like, they could have done a lot more with just him being, this is what happens to all the Moderati. No matter what happens, you either get consumed by the Titan, like Princeps Gearhorn, or this is just, you get a plot of land to take care of in a hive world. That's it.
Yeah.
That's your retirement.
Yep.
So, yeah, the plot is basically the Chaos Titan forces appear out of nowhere. They battle. Varco's tank company is wiped out. Callie's force is wiped out. And most of the rest of the book they're running, the Loyalist Legion Titans arrive to cheering fanfare. There's a lot of cool Titan on Titan action.
Yep.
There's really, really good. I mean, it's just, again, he writes it well.
Yeah.
He writes it, you just feel the tension of being inside a Titan.
Yep.
And you feel the different Titans and how they move and how they fight, which I think was the most important. Like I said, the Warhounds are fast, they hide, they ambush. I mean, it doesn't feel like it's just two big robots clanking, blasting each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
And, there's always that question when you have these kind of like different tier of war machines. Well, why wouldn't you ever just want as many warlords as you can get?
Yeah.
And there's some truth to that. They're really powerful, but also you see the benefit of
a Warhound.
Of what a Warhound can do, of what a Reaver can do, that kind of stuff.
Warhounds to me had the most character.
Yeah.
I love those guys.
Absolutely.
They're so cool.
And you get to be in the cockpit of a Warhound. And that's really cool to see.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed that.
There's a scrap of old information. Feist was going through and trying to find a bunch of old stuff. They opened up the archives and they found this piece of information that is proof, quote unquote, proof that the Emperor is not the Omnissiah, which, okay, but he's also not divine.
Yes.
That is heresy.
Yes, it is.
They bring it to the Signorus and he burns it.
Yep.
He's like, well, we don't need this.
Yep.
This is gone. He knows that if this got out, it would cause a panic. But there's an adept who, I don't know, one of the major characters I didn't mention, like one of the 20, and she believes in the new way, and she sees this information and feels it needs to get out.
Yeah.
So she broadcasts it
Yep.
to everybody.
Open channel, pretty much.
Open channel. So whoopsie, but not, right? It's almost like she wants to cause trouble.
Yeah.
Not recognizing what the problem will be, which is a mass panic and a civil war. Like the Imperial citizens accuse the Mechanicus of being traitors in this rioting that happens, and this Forge World kind of walls itself up and shuts down. So this is kind of this schism that happens.
Well, and then because of that information ends up being the reason, the justification for a coup.
Yes.
Against the Adept Signoris.
Yeah, the Signoris is basically battling Egan and Inhort. They're two lesser ones. They take over, and they knew about these logs years ago. They've been waiting for this moment. They kill him, and Feist escapes.
Yep.
And the Forge goes on lockdown.
Yep.
So that's this Civil War kind of battle, right? There's a standoff between the Legio Titans of the Arrestin Forge and the Legio Invicta from Off-World. Now, the Titans from the Arrestin Forge, there's not very many of them. There's more from the Off-World. Tarson actually threatens to kill Princehorn rather than turn his guns on another part.
Yeah.
Because Princehorn is from the Arrestin Forge.
And he's ordering targeting just in case it goes bad.
Just in case it goes bad, yeah.
Yep.
So there's this standoff.
Yep.
Like all these Titans are kind of in a standoff. And right about then, the Chaos Titans are sort of revealed as, oh, wait a minute. By the way, we're fighting each other, but there is this huge threat over here.
Yeah.
And things kind of just gradually die down. So Egan kills Ptolemy, and the Civil War kind of ends, right?
Yep.
Right, really before it got started. And the Titans march off to battle Chaos. And that's kind of the way the book ends, right?
Yeah.
All these little endings happen. But it gives you a sense of the entire range of the battle, and a lot of the action takes place between characters or Titans. There's very little third-person narrative. It's not like this. There's never this voice of God as it's describing, here's what's happening.
Yeah, it's all rooted in the perception of a character.
Character versus character combat, which is what he does so well.
Yep.
And what makes the book so compelling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even the characters I don't care about, he still writes them interesting.
Yeah, and Abnett's really good at that. We're not criticizing, I mean, outside of Stefan, but even then he's a well-written, weak-willed,
he is.
Paranoid dude. We're not his characterization is always really good. It's how well is he able to use this characterization to really drive forward the larger piece of the book.
Yeah, and in many ways the plot is it's weird to write a plot outline because you really have to start with the characters. The plot itself is just sort of a point A to point B, and even then it doesn't really resolve in a way that feels satisfactory, but maybe that's war. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and that's definitely true. Well, and one thing that I really like, there's that last little moment of the coup when, one of the coup members is a true believer of the new way. And he's been doing all of this because of the information that was revealed and because he believes, and this is right, and people need to know. And then he finds out that the other, Egan, I think it is, that did it, Egan modified the data just a little bit.
Just a touch.
Just a bit to make it just really ironclad proof when it was a suggestion before. And he has this moment of realization of, you've undone everything.
Yep.
You know, by tainting this, nothing can be taken as truth anymore.
Yeah,
and,
that's a cool moment for sure.
And it's cool because the book ends without ever really making commentary on which one of the ways is true.
Yeah.
Is the Emperor the Omnissiah? Is he not? And you get that with Varco too, because Varco has divine intervention happen that is not the Emperor's divine intervention explicitly. It could be the Emperor. If the old way is true, it is the Emperor. If the new way is true, it's the Omnissiah.
Yeah.
He has an Omnissiah cog from the front plate of his tank that ends up in his pocket.
Yeah.
And then he uses that as kind of like a divining rod to figure out where he's supposed to go. He's like, I don't know where to go. Throws it down and it kind of points away. And he's like, well, we're going to go that way.
Yeah.
And it ends up leading him to this tower. And then, he's able to defeat the plans of chaos. So that's divine intervention. Who was it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Was it the Omnissiah because it was an Omnissiah cog? Was it the Emperor? Are they the same person? So I do like how Titanicus leaves that philosophical discussion unresolved.
I think it does. What it does really well is paint awesome characters in conflict.
Yep.
The conflict is not boring conflict either.
No.
It's conflict between ideas and passions and emotions and things like that. And also there's this external force kind of bearing on them a little bit.
which ramps all the pressure up to 11.
Which ramps it up. The plot itself, maybe it wasn't meant to be. Maybe we're thinking, maybe I'm expecting a little more of a mechanical thing that it ends in a satisfying way. Mm-hmm. This just kind of ends. And sometimes I wonder if maybe this should have been longer. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think it's, there's a lot of gritty combat action, which he does best. There's that enemy within. So the true enemy is not chaos, but it's the fractured Imperium. Mm-hmm. It's the zombie movies where it's not just the enemy is, we've seen them, but they're us, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
There's that deep conspiracy story, and there's some AdMech sort of philosophical differences. And I think actually that is weird way. The themes are very simple or similar to Imperator, but done in a completely different way.
Absolutely. And really, this book is highly readable.
Yes, it's very.
I'd read it before. I own the book. I've had it on my bookshelf for years, and I devoured it again. Yeah, just picking it back up, I blitzed through it.
Yep,
it was good. It was really good. So
Abnett's good. He's good. Gav Thrope can be good, and I think in this book I will say, let's compare the two books. I think Titanicus is a better written book. Mm-hmm. It touches more. It has more interesting characters. Mm-hmm. I think Imperator is good in its moments, but Titanicus to me is a better written book. Yeah, but I would recommend both of them. I would say Titanicus is more so than Imperator. Yeah,
I think Imperator has a little bit more straightforward of a narrative.
Yeah.
Straightforward of a plot.
Sure.
Which can serve it if you're just looking for here's the problem, here's how the problem resolved, here's where we're ending. Yeah. That it's really good at that. Yeah. I recommend both. I'd agree. Titanicus a little bit more.
Yeah. What I liked is the character of Exus is very different.
Yeah.
And I think I like that guy put so much effort into making him feel different.
Yeah.
The Mechanicus in Titanicus feel just, like I said, they just feel human with some augments. Like they don't feel weird enough to be Mechanicus. They're just, and it's a little bit jarring at first.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I didn't mind it. Really.
No, neither did I.
But yeah, I think both books are definitely worth a read.
Yeah.
Titanicus probably more so, but I think Titanicus, Imperator is, you can actually get it on Audible, I think, if you want to listen to the audiobook.
Yeah.
Titanicus, though, it's been out for a while. It's not that hard to pick up, I think.
No. And it's a nice looking book, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good.
And I would say either one of these books, if you want to know more about how Titan legions fight, they're good. Yeah. They're really good.
Yeah.
That's an element of 40K that we talk about a lot. Titans are one of those big things that people know about, and they like to, but a lot of people don't realize how they fight. So, yeah. Yeah, either book will give you a lot of insight into what it looks like to be part of a Titan Legion.
For sure. All right. Well, that is it for our Black Library, covering the Black Library books for this version of it. So next, here's what we're going to do next. We're going to tackle the Siege of Terra. Mm-hmm. And so the Siege of Terra, that we've decided to not do Horus Heresy because there's so much of it.
Oh, man.
Siege of Terra is almost a self-contained arc.
Yep.
So we're starting. And our next book club will be John French's Solar War and Guy Haley's Lost in the Dam. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be we'll do them 2 by 2, each one. The reason we're doing Siege of Terra is because everyone is raving about
Saturnine.
The Saturnine.
Yeah.
But it's book 4 in the Siege of Terra. And I'm like, well, I can't read book 4 without reading the first 3.
Exactly.
So let's turn it into a Black Library book club. As a Dan Abnett fan, I'm all about it, but I can't get there until I read my first 3. So
exactly.
The next Black Library book club, we'll talk Solar War and we'll talk Lost in the Damned on our way to Saturnine. And then obviously by then, I think there's probably a couple a year that are coming out. So we'll follow that. The next several Black Library book clubs will be covering the Siege of Terra series.
Yeah.
For sure.
Which I'm excited for.
Yeah.
Horus Heresy has been building up for this for years. Mm-hmm. And the Siege of Terra is, the pivotal moment of 40K fluff in a lot of ways. And it's going to be very interesting to see the 2020 on take of it.
Yeah,
really,
for sure.
What does it look like when we, as a community and a group, look back on this thing that's really only ever been described in very rough terms.
Yeah,
and we really iron out all the details of it.
Yeah, and it'd be nice if the game itself kind of had could put a bow on it. I feel like it's incomplete right now. The Horus Heresy game. I know people still play 30K, but there's more books to come.
Yep.
And it'd be nice to sort of put that on a shelf to see all of them and be done.
Yeah.
For those fans that still play 30K.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
All right. Well, that is all we have. Thank you so much for listening to the show. We love to hear from our listeners, so please feel free to message us on Facebook or email us at thebattlehosts@gmail.com. If you'd like to support us, you can help us in a few different ways. You can tell your friends about us. You can like us on Facebook. You can leave a review on iTunes, which does help to boost our listening audience. Finally, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thebattlehosts. For as little as $1 a month, you can help us with the cost of running the show and staying engaged with the 40K community. So thanks for listening to Battle Host. Remember to be a better gamer.
And build a bigger Titan.
There you go. Good night.